Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just came over the newswire a few minutes ago that on Friday morning, March 1st, there will be a meeting at the White House involving President Obama, the leadership of the House, Speaker Boehner, leadership of the Senate, Senate Majority Leader Reid, to begin a process of talking about resolving the issue obviously confronting as a nation a few hours away, which is an automatic put into effect by the Budget Control Act in 2011 to cut discretionary spending across the board. I begin with that point because, in fact, that really should have been happening months ago. In fact, that was the intent of sequestration, which is a mechanism created in 1985 by the Graham-Rudman-Hollings legislation that set up the formula for sequestration that cut across, again, defense and non-defense programs. And as Senator Graham, Phil Graham, who was the inventor of sequestration, said in a speech a couple of years ago, it was never the objective of Graham-Rudman to trigger sequester. The objective of Graham-Rudman was to have the threat of sequester force, compromise, and action. In other words, this was a mechanism that was designed to hurt. It was designed to create so much pain politically that the two sides, which again were in a similar point of gridlock in 1985, would begin the process of negotiation to deal with a structural deficit. And if you look at the history of what occurred from 1985 up until the early 2000s, that pressure actually did force Congress to face up to the fact that we could not continue to pile up deficits and burden our children and grandchildren with further debt. Unfortunately, in this present Congress, it's taken a little longer for the message to get through, but nonetheless, the meeting that's scheduled on Friday morning, hopefully, is going to begin the process of having the two sides do what their predecessors did in the 80s and 90s and begin the process of a balanced plan to eliminate the structural deficit that our nation confronts today. Yesterday, President Obama was over in Newport News in Virginia talking to shipyard workers about the fact that the Navy, which is obviously a critical part of our federal government, who now has to hit spending cut targets over the next 7 months. We're 5 months into a fiscal year right now, has begun the process of the refueling of the USS Lincoln. Again, one of our 10 aircraft carriers, which are so critical to force projection in this country. And he was absolutely right to be there. This is a program which, if it's canceled or delayed, is going to daisy chain its way through our Navy's fleet of 287 ships, who again must be repaired and maintained constantly to make sure that they're operations. I represent southeastern Connecticut, the home of Electric Boat Shipyard that builds and repairs nuclear submarines. We have the USS Providence slated to come in for, again, a needed overhaul and repair later this fiscal year. The Navy has notified the shipyard that that work is going to be suspended. That's 200,000 man-hours for welders, for shipwrights, for machinists, for electricians, that, again, do amazing work with incredible skills to make sure that, again, our fleet is capable of meeting the mission requests that are out there. The USS Miami, which was a submarine that was burned in an arsonist's fire last year, again, is another repair job, which EB was going to be on the road helping shipyard workers up in Kittery, Maine, to make sure that that critical vessel was going to be, again, back in the fleet. Again, that project has now been put on ice because of sequestration. These are just totally irrational, destructive outcomes for, again, a bill which was designed to force compromise, not to be a policy, not to be an outcome. And when you look at Admiral Greenert, the CNO of the Navy, who is one of the most outstanding leaders in our country, he has canceled the USS Harry Truman, which is a carrier strike force that is scheduled to go over to the Middle East to fly air cover missions for our troops in Afghanistan to keep the Straits of Hormuz open, where 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day. This is, again, a policy or an outcome that threatens the military readiness of this country. And Secretary of the Department of Defense, General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, has made that crystal clear. So the stakes could not be higher for our country to make sure that this process, which belatedly is starting on Friday morning, is going to result in smart, balanced ways to reduce the deficit. And I can offer one big idea that will get us to that point. I sit on the Agriculture Committee, which is a great bipartisan committee that's been working hard in terms of reforming ag policy in this country. It is time that the direct payment system to farms comes to an end. And the good news is Republicans and Democrats on that committee and Republicans and Democrats in this chamber agree on that. We can help farmers deal with the vagaries of weather and unexpected events through risk insurance, which is far cheaper to the U.S. taxpayer than direct payments. That will save $30 billion over the next 5 years. That is a huge step forward that we can use as a building block to avoid these horrible outcomes and make sure that Senator Graham's warning to us is heeded by this chamber and by this Congress. And I yield back the balance of my time.